The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead as I smoothed down the silk of my champagne-colored gown. 10 years of marriage culminating in this perfect moment. At least that's what everyone thought. My husband James stood across the ballroom, champagne, flute in hand, his perfect smile directed at everyone but me. If you looked at us from the outside, we were the golden couple of Lakeside Heights, the successful attorney and his devoted wife, celebrating a decade of picture-perfect matrimony. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Little did our guests know that behind James's practiced smile and my carefully applied makeup lay the remnants of what our marriage had become, a beautifully wrapped empty box. "You look stunning tonight," Sophie whispered, appearing at my side with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. "Here, you look like you need this more than I do." I accepted the glass gratefully, taking a larger sip than was probably appropriate for the hostess of such an elegant affair. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me," she assured, linking her arm through mine. "To everyone else, you're the radiant wife celebrating her milestone anniversary. If only they knew that I had spent the previous night alone, while my husband claimed to be working late for the 3rd time that week. 10 years ago, I walked down the aisle toward James Parker with a heart full of dreams and eyes full of stars. He was everything I thought I wanted, ambitious, charming, and so sure of himself. When he slipped that diamond ring on my finger and promised forever, I believed him with every fiber of my being. For the first few years, we were happy. Genuinely happy. James was climbing the ranks at Mitchell & Grant Law Firm, while I built my reputation as an event planner at Preston and Associates. We complemented each other perfectly, his analytical mind balanced by my creativity, his ambition fueled by my support. We bought our dream house in Lakeside Heights, hosted dinner parties that became the talk of our social circle, and began planning for the family we both said we wanted. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The passionate conversations dwindled into mundane exchanges about schedules and social obligations. The dream of children was perpetually postponed because the timing wasn't right, or after the next promotion. Still, I persisted. I threw myself into making our life appear perfect, even as I felt James slipping away. I organized charity, galas that connected him with high-profile clients. I hosted dinner parties where he could impress the senior partners. I became the perfect corporate wife, always smiling, always supportive, always there to make him look good. "You're so lucky," people would tell me. "James is such a catch. You two are perfect together." And I would smile and nod, ignoring the growing emptiness inside me, the questions that kept me awake at night, and the text messages I pretended not to see on his phone. Sophie was the only one who knew the truth, or at least part of it. She saw how I would check my phone anxiously when James was late, how my smile would falter when he would cancel our plans at the last minute. She was there the night I found the receipt for a dinner for 2 at Alvaro's, the city's most romantic restaurant, on an evening when James was supposedly at a conference in Chicago. "You need to confront him, Emma," she'd urged. "You deserve better than this." But I wasn't ready. Confronting James meant confronting the possibility that our marriage was a facade, that the life I had worked so hard to build was crumbling beneath my feet. So I buried my suspicions and focused on what I could control, planning our 10th anniversary party, a celebration so magnificent it would remind everyone, including James, of what we had together. For months, I poured everything into the preparations. I secured the grand ballroom at the Bellamy Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. I hand-selected every flower, every menu item, every piece of music that would play. I commissioned a highlight video of our 10 years together, collecting photos and videos from friends and family. I even found a vintage watch that James had, admired months ago, spending far more than I should have to surprise him with the perfect gift. The week before the party, I noticed James was distracted, constantly checking his phone and finding excuses to leave the room to take calls. I told myself it was work stress. His firm was in the final stages of a major corporate merger after all. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The night before our anniversary, I laid out his favorite suit and the blue tie that matched his eyes. I placed the exquisitely wrapped watch on his dresser with a card expressing my love and gratitude for our years together. I went to bed early, hoping he would join me, hoping we could reconnect before our big celebration. But James never came home that night. When he finally walked through the door at 7 the next morning, his excuse was ready. He'd fallen asleep at the office while preparing for a crucial meeting. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but his story too practiced, too smooth. "It's our anniversary, James," I said quietly. "I know, and I'm sorry. Tonight will be perfect, I promise. I have a surprise for you that will make up for everything." There was something in his voice, a note of genuine emotion that caught me off guard. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe he had realized what he was risking. Maybe tonight would be a new beginning for us. As I spent the day getting ready, having my hair and makeup done, slipping into the gown I had carefully selected months ago, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps James's surprise would be a recommitment to our marriage, a second honeymoon, or even finally agreeing to start the family I had longed for. I arrived at the Bellamy early to oversee the final touches. Everything was perfect. The soft lighting, the string quartet playing our favorite songs, the champagne towers, and the elegant 5-tier cake adorned with sugar flowers that matched our wedding bouquet. I had spared no expense, wanting every detail to reflect the love and dedication I still felt, despite everything. Guests began to arrive at 7, exclaiming over the opulence of the setting. James arrived separately, having claimed another last-minute meeting, but he was punctual and sober, dressed in the suit I had laid out and wearing a smile that almost reached his eyes. "You've outdone yourself," he whispered, kissing my cheek as cameras flashed around us. "This is incredible." "I wanted it to be special," I replied, searching his face for some sign of the man I had fallen in love with. For a while, it felt like old times. We greeted our guests hand in hand, accepted congratulations with gracious smiles, and even shared a dance that made my heart race with remembered joy. James seemed present, engaged, his hand warm against the small of my back as he guided me across the dance floor. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity I hadn't seen in years. "Right now? In this moment?" "Yes," I answered honestly. He nodded, something like regret crossing his features. "Emma, But whatever he was about to say was cut short as the music ended, and we were swept into conversations with other guests. The dinner was sumptuous, the toasts heartfelt. Friends and family shared stories of our courtship, our wedding, milestones we had celebrated together. I felt tears stinging my eyes at the reminder of happier times, of the love we had once shared, so openly. As dessert was being served, James stood, tapping his glass with a spoon to call for attention. This wasn't on the program I had meticulously planned. I looked up at him, puzzled. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate with Emma and me," he began, his voice strong and clear. 10 years is a significant milestone, one that prompts reflection and honesty. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I maintained my smile, but my fingers clutched my napkin beneath the table. "Emma has been an extraordinary partner. She's supported my career, created our beautiful home, and been the perfect wife in every way that others can see." He paused, looking directly at me. But sometimes perfection on the outside doesn't reflect what's happening within. The room went silent. I felt Sophie stiffen beside me. "The truth is," James continued, "our marriage hasn't been working. For some time. We've been going through the motions, presenting a united front to the world while growing further apart behind closed doors." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I sat frozen, my face a mask of composure while my heart hammered against my ribs. I've been struggling with how to address this, particularly with tonight's celebration approaching. I considered waiting, but that felt dishonest. To everyone here, but especially to Emma. He took a deep breath, and in that suspended moment, I knew what was coming. I had prepared myself for many potential disasters, a drunken scene, a forgotten speech, even an argument, but not this, not a public execution of our marriage. I've met someone who has helped me realize what's been missing in my life. Her name is Olivia Reed. The silence in the room deepened, broken only by a few shocked gasps. "Olivia, would you stand?" From a table near the back, a young woman rose. She was beautiful, slender with glossy dark hair and wide eyes that darted nervously around the room before settling on James with unmistakable adoration. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Olivia and I have been seeing each other for the past 6 months, James announced, his voice gaining confidence. "We didn't plan for this to happen, but we've fallen in love. I've asked her to move in with me, and she's agreed." The room erupted in hushed exclamations and uncomfortable shifting. All eyes swung between James, still standing with an air of relief, Olivia looking both triumphant and uncomfortable, and me, the blindsided wife whose anniversary celebration had just transformed into her public humiliation. I felt the weight of their pity, like a physical thing, pressing down on my shoulders, crushing the breath from my lungs. The beautiful room blurred around me as everything I had built, my marriage, my social standing, my carefully crafted image, collapsed in an instant. But even in that moment of complete devastation, something else stirred within me. A tiny spark of liberation, a whisper that perhaps this public ending was also a beginning. James had just freed me from the prison of pretense I had been living in for years. I looked at my husband. Could I still call him that? Standing tall and unapologetic, having dropped his bombshell with surgical precision. Then I looked at Olivia, young and beautiful, watching him with the same stars in her eyes that I once had. And in that crystallizing moment, I made a decision. I would not crumble. I would not scream or cry or create the scene that would no doubt become fodder for gossip for months to come. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I slowly rose to my feet, glass in hand, my movements deliberate and dignified. The room fell silent once more. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "It seems James has decided to share his surprise earlier than planned." I managed a small smile, ignoring the tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. "I too have an announcement to make." James looked at me with surprise, clearly not expecting this response. "But first, I'd like to thank you all for coming, to celebrate what was supposed to be our 10th anniversary." I raised my glass slightly. "While this evening has taken an unexpected turn, I'm grateful for your presence and support." I took a small sip of champagne, buying myself a moment to collect my thoughts, to decide what my next words would be. The path ahead suddenly stretched before me, uncertain, terrifying, but also strangely full of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider in years. I looked directly at James, then at Olivia, then swept my gaze across the room full of friends, family, and colleagues who had witnessed my humiliation. The perfect ending to my perfect charade of a marriage. "It seems tonight is a night for honesty," I continued, finding strength in each word. "So allow me to be honest too. The ballroom of the Bellamy Hotel held its collective breath as I stood before them, champagne glass still in hand, my husband's confession hanging in the air between us. James had the audacity to look concerned, as if my response might somehow inconvenience his carefully planned exit from our marriage. For years, I began, my voice gaining strength with each word, I've dedicated myself to being the perfect wife. I've arranged my life around James's career, his ambitions, his needs. I gestured around the room. I planned this entire celebration as a testament to a marriage that, as it turns out, has been over for quite some time, at least for one of us. I turned to look directly at Olivia, who had the grace to blush under my gaze. Olivia, I don't blame you for falling for my husband. He can be quite charming when he wants something. I should know. I fell for it too, 10 years ago. Her eyes widened, clearly not expecting this calm acknowledgement. James, I continued, turning back to him, I wish you had found the courage to be honest with me before I spent months planning this evening. Before I invited everyone we know to witness what I thought was a celebration but has turned into. Whatever this is. I gestured vaguely with my free hand. His expression shifted from concern to discomfort as murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. But in a strange way, I should thank you, I said, surprising even myself with the words. Because your announcement tonight has freed me from something I've been too afraid to face, the truth that we've been living a lie. I set my glass down and reached for my clutch, retrieving the small velvet box containing the vintage watch I had planned to give him. I had a surprise for you too, I said, opening the box to reveal the gleaming timepiece inside. A reminder of all the time we've spent together, and a promise of more to come. I closed it with a decisive snap. But it seems our time has run out. I placed the box on the table, no longer a gift, but a symbol of what had been lost. So yes, James has his announcement, and now I have mine. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strange sense of clarity cutting through the shock and pain. Effective immediately, I am reclaiming my life. I'm taking the offer I received last month to start my own event planning business. An opportunity I initially declined because it would have required too much time away from our marriage. James's expression shifted from discomfort to surprise. This was clearly news to him. Daniel Cooper approached me after the charity gala I organized at his restaurant, I explained, not just to James but to the room. He was impressed enough to offer financial backing for me to start my own company. At the time, I thought it would take too much focus away from being the supportive wife you needed. I spotted Daniel among the guests, his expression one of quiet encouragement. He gave me a slight nod that bolstered my resolve. I've spent 10 years building your career, your social connections, your perfect image, I told James, my voice, even but firm. Now I'm going to build something for myself. A smattering of applause broke out, led by Sophie from her seat near the front. James looked increasingly uncomfortable, his planned moment of liberation transforming into something he hadn't anticipated. So thank you all for coming tonight, I said, addressing our guests once more. While this isn't the celebration we planned, perhaps it's something more valuable, a moment of truth and new beginnings. I raised my glass once more. To honesty, however belated, and to new chapters. People hesitantly raised their glasses, the awkwardness of the situation giving way to something else, respect perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of my dignity in the face of public humiliation. As the toast concluded, the string quartet, consummate professionals, began to play again, providing a soundtrack to the most surreal moment of my life. I walked away from the main table with my head held high, feeling Sophie fall into step beside me. "Holy shit, Emma," she whispered, linking her arm through mine. "Are you okay?" "Not remotely," I admitted, maintaining my smile for the benefit of watching eyes. "But I will be." We made our way to a quiet corner near the exit. where I finally allowed my composure to crack slightly. My hands were shaking, and I could feel the delayed shock setting in. "I can't believe he did that," I said, my voice barely audible. 10 years, Sophie. 10 years. And he announces his affair at our anniversary party. "He's a coward," Sophie said flatly. "He wanted a public setting so you wouldn't make a scene." "Well, I didn't give him the satisfaction," I said, straightening my spine again. "But I can't stay here." "Of course not. Let me take you home." I shook my head. "Not that home. I can't go back there tonight. Not while he's—" I couldn't finish the thought. "Then you're coming to my place," Sophie declared, already reaching for her phone to call a car. "We'll have a proper breakdown. There, with wine that doesn't cost $50 a glass and absolutely no photographers." As we waited for our ride, I watched the party continue in a strange, subdued fashion. Clusters of guests huddled together, no doubt dissecting the drama they had just witnessed. James was nowhere to be seen, nor was Olivia. They had probably made a strategic exit while all eyes were on me. Daniel Cooper approached us, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. "Emma," he said, his deep voice carrying that slight Italian accent that made everything sound more sincere. "I meant what I said last month. The offer still stands, whenever you're ready." I looked at him, this successful restaurateur who had seen something in me that I had almost forgotten existed. Ambition, talent, potential beyond being James's. "Proof?" "I'm ready now," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'll call you on Monday." He nodded, squeezing my hand briefly. "I look forward to it." As Sophie and I slipped out of the hotel and into the waiting car, I felt oddly weightless, as if I had shed a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. The humiliation and shock were still there, throbbing beneath the surface, but alongside them was something unexpected, a glimmer of possibility, of freedom. Back at Sophie's apartment, away from prying eyes and the perfectly orchestrated setting of my failed anniversary, I finally allowed myself to cry. Great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside me, releasing years of ignored doubts and suppressed disappointments. Sophie sat beside me on her couch, supplying tissues and pouring generous glasses of wine, letting me purge the emotions I had contained so admirably in public. "What am I going to do?" I asked finally, my voice hoarse from crying. "Our whole life is entangled. The house, our friends, our finances." "You're going to take it one day at a time," Sophie said firmly, "starting with calling Daniel on Monday and accepting his offer." "I don't even know if I can do it anymore," I confessed. "I've spent so long focusing on James's career, his needs." "Stop right there," Sophie interrupted. "Who organized tonight's event? Who coordinated the Marshall Foundation Gala last month? That had everyone talking for weeks? Who saved the Wilson wedding when the original venue flooded 2 days before the ceremony?" "I did," I admitted quietly. "Exactly. You're brilliant at what you do, Emma. The difference is, now you'll be doing it for yourself, not to make James look good." I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. For years, my talent had been channeled into supporting James's image, creating the perfect backdrop for his ambitions. What might I achieve if I redirected that energy toward my own dreams? "I should probably call a lawyer," I said, the practical realities of my situation beginning to penetrate the emotional fog. "Already on it," Sophie said, showing me her phone screen where she had pulled up the contact information for Catherine Reed, one of the city's most formidable divorce attorneys. "She's known for taking cheating husbands to the cleaners." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "That's why you love me," she replied, already typing out a message requesting an appointment. "Now, do you want to talk about where you're going to stay? You can crash here as long as you need, but—" "I'm not letting James drive me out of my own home," I said, a sudden fierceness rising in me. "That house is as much mine as his. More, actually, since I'm the one who renovated it, decorated it, made it a home while he was always working late. That's my girl, Sophie said approvingly. So what's the plan? I reached for my phone, scrolling until I found Noah's number. Noah Taylor had been our friend for years, originally James's college roommate, but he'd always been kinder to me than my husband deserved. And, more importantly, he worked at the same law firm and would know exactly what James was up to. I need information, I said, my fingers hovering over the call button. And then I need a strategy. That night, sleeping in Sophie's guest room, I dreamed of the life I might have had if I had recognized the truth sooner, if I had prioritized my own dreams alongside James's, if I had confronted the signs of his wandering attention, if I had been brave enough to face the reality of our failing marriage before it culminated in public humiliation. But as I woke to the pale light of dawn filtering through unfamiliar curtains, I realized something important. It wasn't too late. At 35, I still had time to build the life I wanted, on my terms. James and his affair had not ended my story. They had merely closed a chapter that had gone on too long. I reached for my phone and sent 2 messages before rising from bed. The first was to Daniel Cooper. I'd like to discuss that business proposition. Are you free for lunch on Monday? The second was to Catherine Reed, confirming the appointment Sophie had arranged. Then I block-deleted every anniversary message, without reading them. Today was day 1 of my new life, and I had no intention of looking back. The Monday after my anniversary party disaster dawned bright and clear, mocking the chaos that had become my life. I hadn't returned to my home since that night. Instead, I had spent the weekend holed up in Sophie's guest room, alternating between moments of numbing grief and unexpected clarity. Are you sure you want to do this today? Sophie asked, leaning against the doorframe as I applied my makeup with careful precision. No one would blame you for taking more time. I met her eyes in the mirror. If I don't go now, I might lose my nerve. I finished applying my lipstick, the bold red I rarely wore because James always said it was too much. Besides, I have a lunch meeting with Daniel. My first stop that morning wasn't the house or even my office at Preston & Associates, where I would eventually need to tender my resignation. Instead, I directed the rideshare driver to the sleek downtown offices of Catherine Reed, divorce attorney extraordinaire. Catherine's reputation preceded her, a steely-eyed litigator known for her methodical dismantling of unfaithful spouses in court. Her office reflected her personality, minimal, elegant, with not a single object out of place. Mrs. Parker, she greeted me, her handshake firm and confident. I've been briefed on the general situation. Let's discuss how to proceed. For the next hour, I laid out the details of my marriage, the joint properties, the investments, the gradual way James had taken control of our finances while I focused on being the perfect corporate wife. I didn't cry, not even when describing the public humiliation of the anniversary party. Something about Catherine's clinical approach made it easier to view my situation as a case to be managed rather than the implosion of my life. Based on what you've told me, we're in a strong position, Catherine said, making notes in a leather-bound portfolio. 10 years of marriage, clear evidence of infidelity, and your significant contributions to his career advancement, both through direct support and by enhancing his social capital through your event planning work. She looked up, her eyes sharp. You mentioned you declined a business opportunity to support his career. Can you elaborate on that? I explained about Daniel's offer, how after organizing a charity gala at his restaurant, he had approached me about starting my own event planning company with his financial backing, and you turned it down because James needed me to focus on hosting dinners for his firm's clients and organizing the charity events that got him noticed by the senior partners. The words sounded hollow now, a reflection of priorities that no longer made sense. Catherine nodded. That's exactly the kind of sacrifice that strengthens our position. Now, about the house. I want it, I said firmly. I redesigned every inch of that place. James only cares about the address and what it represents. Good. Direct and clear. She made another note. What about his relationship with Ms. Reed? How long has it been going on? 6 months, according to his announcement. But I suspect longer. I twisted my wedding ring, still on my finger out of habit. There were signs I ignored. Late nights, unexplained absences, a sudden change in his preferences. Catherine's eyebrow arched. Change in preferences? Little things. New cologne, clothes I hadn't selected for him, restaurants he suddenly wanted to try. I shrugged. In retrospect, it was obvious. It usually is, in hindsight. For the first time, a hint of sympathy colored her professional demeanor. Mrs. Parker? Emma, I interrupted. I think we can be on a first-name basis if you're going to help me dismantle my marriage. A slight smile curved her lips. Emma, what I need to know now is how you want to proceed. Some clients prefer to negotiate quietly, avoiding further public exposure. Others. She paused delicately. Others prefer a more assertive approach, especially after public humiliation. I considered the question. Part of me wanted to slip away quietly, to avoid more gossip and speculation. But a stronger emerging part, the part that had stood up at that party and announced my own liberation, wanted justice. James leveraged everything I built for him, I said slowly. My social connections, my event planning skills, my dedication to his image. He climbed to partner using my shoulders as a ladder, then discarded me when he no longer needed the boost. I removed my wedding ring, placing it deliberately on her desk. I want what I've earned. Catherine smiled fully then, the expression of a predator who has just identified her prey. Then that's exactly what we'll get. After finalizing our initial strategy, I stepped out into the bright morning sunshine, feeling strangely lighter. The weight of my failed marriage still pressed on me, but it was now balanced by a sense of purpose, a clear path forward. My next stop was the upscale restaurant where I had arranged to meet Daniel Cooper. The Riverside Grill was one of the city's newest hotspots, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the waterfront. Daniel had opened it just last year, adding to his growing collection of successful eateries across the city. He stood as I approached the table, his expression warm but careful. Emma, I wasn't sure you'd come. I keep my appointments, I replied, settling into the chair he held for me. Especially the important ones. Daniel signaled for the waiter, who promptly brought the sparkling water I preferred. I raised an eyebrow at this small attention to detail. I pay attention, Daniel said simply. It's how I built my business, noticing what others miss. Like noticing an event planner who might be ready for something more? I asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. I noticed someone with exceptional talent who seemed trapped in a role that was too small for her capabilities. He corrected gently. The rest. Well, that became apparent at your party. I winced slightly. I'm sure the entire city is talking about it by now. People talk, he agreed with a casual shrug. But they'll move on to the next scandal soon enough. What matters is what you do next. His directness was refreshing after years of James's careful political maneuvering, always calculating the angle, the advantage, the appearance. You mentioned starting my own event planning business, I said, getting to the point. Is that offer still on the table? It is. Daniel leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. I've seen what you can do, Emma. The Marshall Foundation Gala was extraordinary. Every detail perfect. Every moment orchestrated for maximum impact. You have a gift. A gift I've been using to advance someone else's career, I noted. Exactly. Imagine what you could accomplish if you were building something for yourself. He pulled out a sleek folder from his briefcase. I've had some preliminary materials drawn up, just ideas, nothing binding. I accepted the folder, opening it to find a business plan, complete with financial projections, potential client lists, and even mock-ups of branding materials. The proposed company, name caught my eye, Parker Events and Experiences. Just my name, I murmured, running my finger over the elegant logo. It should be your name, Daniel said firmly. Your vision, your talent, your company. Something warm unfurled in my chest. Pride, possibility, the first genuine excitement I had felt in longer than I cared to admit. Why are you doing this? I asked, looking up from the proposal. What's in it for you? Daniel smiled, appreciating my directness. 10% return on investment for starters. Your connections in this city's social circles are valuable, and I believe this venture will be profitable. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. But beyond that? I recognize talent when I see it, Emma. Some of my most successful restaurants were born from backing chefs who just needed a chance to shine. I studied him, searching for hidden motives, for the catch I had been conditioned to expect. But all I saw was sincere interest and business acumen, a straightforward offer based on mutual benefit. I'd want creative control, I said, testing. Of course, I'm a silent partner, financial backing, business advice if you want it, but the vision is yours. And if it fails? Business always involves risk, he acknowledged. But based on what I've seen of your work, I'm willing to bet on you. Betting on myself, what a novel concept. For years, all my energy had gone into supporting James's ambitions, his career, his image. The thought of directing that same dedication toward my own dreams was both terrifying and exhilarating. I need to think about it, I said finally, closing the folder. This weekend has been on a lot. Take all the time you need, Daniel said, his tone genuine. The opportunity isn't going anywhere. As we finished our lunch, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, the city's evolving food scene, upcoming cultural events, mutual acquaintances. For the first time since the disastrous party, I found myself laughing naturally, engaged in conversation that had nothing to do with James or the shattered remnants of my marriage. You're going to be fine, you know, Daniel said as we were preparing to leave. Better than fine. How can you be so sure? I asked, gathering my purse. Because adversity reveals character, Emma. And yours is impressive. With those words resonating in my mind, I faced my next challenge, returning to the house I had shared with James for the past 8 years. Catherine had advised me to retrieve essential documents and personal items as soon as possible, preferably when James was likely to be at work. I had timed my arrival carefully, pulling into the driveway of our Lakeside Heights home just after 2, when James would be in court for a case I knew had been on his calendar for weeks. Yet as I approached the front door, key in hand, I hesitated. This had been my sanctuary, the place I had poured my heart into creating. Now it felt like entering hostile territory. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was silent, the familiar scent of the lilies I always kept in the foyer mixing with something unfamiliar, a perfume that wasn't mine. Olivia had already been here then. The realization landed like a physical blow. Focus, Emma, I reminded myself. I wasn't here to wallow, I was here with a purpose. I moved efficiently through the house, gathering my personal documents first: birth certificate, passport, the separate banking information Catherine had advised me to secure. Next came irreplaceable personal items, the jewelry my grandmother had left me, the photo albums from before my marriage, the small collection of first edition books I had carefully curated over the years. In our shared home office, I paused at the sight of framed photos still displayed on the walls, Our wedding, vacations, charity events where we smiled like the perfect couple everyone believed us to be. The narrative of our marriage, carefully curated and displayed for all to see. I left them hanging. Let James deal with the ghosts. I was packing the last of my immediate necessities when I heard the front door open. Footsteps in the foyer, then the sound of keys being tossed into the ceramic bowl I had placed there specifically for that purpose. James was home early. For a moment, I considered retreating to the back stairs, avoiding the confrontation. But no, I had done nothing wrong. This was my home too, at least for now. I straightened my shoulders and continued packing, waiting for the inevitable. Emma. His voice came from the bedroom doorway, surprise evident in his tone. I didn't expect to see you here. I turned slowly to face my husband, the man I had pledged my life to, who had stood before our friends and family to announce his infidelity. Clearly, I replied, keeping my voice even. I'm just collecting some things. James looked disheveled, his usual polished appearance fraying at the edges. His tie was loosened, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he hadn't shaved that morning. Good, I thought with unexpected vindictiveness. Let him suffer a little. Where have you been staying? He asked, stepping further into the room. I've been worried. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Worried? That's rich, James. Was that before or after you moved your girlfriend into our home? He had the grace to look ashamed. She's not. I haven't moved her in. She came by once to talk. Save it for someone who hasn't spent 10 years learning to read your lies. I zipped my suitcase with finality. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest of my belongings. Lawyer? His expression shifted from contrite to alarmed. Emma, don't you think we should talk about this first, before involving attorneys? Like you talked to me before announcing your affair at our anniversary party, I countered, feeling a flash of the anger I had suppressed during the public humiliation. Or like you talked to me about Olivia at any point during the 6 months, or more, I suspect, that you were seeing her behind my back? James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had once found endearing. Now it just seemed calculated, part of his courtroom persona designed to convey sincerity. That was poorly handled, he admitted. I should have approached it differently. Poorly handled, I repeated, incredulous. Is that how you'd describe publicly humiliating your wife of 10 years? Just poor handling? What did you expect me to do, Emma? Frustration edged his voice now. We've been growing apart for years. You must have felt it too. What I felt, I said carefully, was that I was pouring everything into supporting your career, your ambitions, your needs, while you were busy finding someone new to worship at the altar of James Parker. He flinched at the accuracy of the assessment. It wasn't like that. No? Then please enlighten me. What was it like, James? Help me understand how the man who promised to love and honor me ended up announcing his affair at an anniversary party I spent months planning. James sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking older than his 39 years. I didn't plan it that way. Seeing you there, so beautiful, so perfect, knowing I had been living a lie. I couldn't keep pretending. How considerate of you to unburden your conscience, I said, my tone acidic. Never mind what it did to me. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. He looked up, his expression earnest. But can't you see this is better in the long run? Being honest about what we both know wasn't working? I stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time in years. This man, who had once been the center of my world, now seemed smaller somehow, diminished by his own choices. What wasn't working, James, was your commitment, your integrity, your vows. I lifted my suitcase from the bed. And you're right about one thing. Honesty is better. So honestly, I've contacted Catherine Reed about representing me in the divorce. His face paled. Catherine Reed? Emma, she's a shark. Yes, she is, I agreed pleasantly. And now she's my shark. I moved toward the door, but James stepped into my path, not touching me but blocking my exit. This doesn't have to be ugly, he said, his lawyer persona emerging. We can handle this reasonably, without dragging each other through the mud. You mean without damaging your carefully cultivated image at the firm? I asked, seeing through him easily. Without the senior partners discovering that their newest golden boy announced his affair at his anniversary party, humiliating the wife who's been instrumental in advancing his career. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. None of this is fair, James, but it is what it is. I stepped around him, refusing to be intimidated in my own home. By the way, I'm accepting Daniel Cooper's offer to start my own event planning business. Just thought you should know. Daniel Cooper? James followed me into the hallway, his voice rising. The restaurateur? Is that what this is about? Have you been planning this all along? I stopped, turning slowly to face him. The accusation was so absurd, so perfectly reflective of his own guilty conscience that I couldn't help but laugh. Projecting much, James? No, unlike you, I haven't been carrying on a secret relationship behind my spouse's back. Daniel made me a business proposition after the Marshall Gala, which I initially declined out of loyalty to you. I let that sink in for a moment. A loyalty that was clearly misplaced. So you're jumping straight from our marriage into his arms? The jealousy in his tone was rich coming from a man who had just introduced his girlfriend to our social circle. This may shock you, James, but not everything is about romantic entanglements. This is about my career, my future, my independence, things I've sacrificed for far too long to support you. I continued down the stairs, feeling his presence behind me but no longer caring what he thought or assumed. At the front door, I turned one last time. Oh, and James? You might want to contact our real estate agent. I'll be keeping the house. The look of stunned disbelief on his face as I closed the door behind me was small compensation for everything I had lost, but it was something. A first step toward reclaiming my power in a relationship where the balance had been skewed for far too long. Back in my car, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The confrontation with James had been painful but necessary. The first of many difficult conversations that lay ahead as we dismantled the life we had built together. Yet alongside the grief and anger, I felt something unexpected stirring. Relief. The weight of maintaining a facade, of ignoring the signs of James's infidelity, of subjugating my own ambitions to support his. It was lifting, allowing me to breathe freely for what felt like the first time in years. My phone chimed with a text from Sophie. How did it go with Catherine? Still on for dinner tonight? I typed back quickly. She's exactly what I need. And yes, to dinner, I have news. Another message came through, this one from Noah. Just, heard Jay got pulled from the Westridge case. Partner's not happy about weekend drama. Let me know if you need anything. So the fallout had begun already. James's carefully constructed professional image was showing cracks, just as Catherine had predicted. I felt no joy in his professional difficulties. Only a grim satisfaction that actions had consequences, even for those who believed themselves above them. I started the car, pulling away from the house that had been the backdrop for the most painful chapter of my life. As I drove toward Sophie's apartment, where I would continue to stay until the immediate legal issues were settled, I mentally drafted an email to Daniel Cooper. I'd like to accept your offer, it would begin. Let's build something extraordinary. The road ahead would be challenging, untangling 10 years of marriage, establishing a new business, rebuilding my identity, separate from my role as James's wife. But for the first time in longer than I cared to admit, I felt a genuine thrill of anticipation for what lay ahead. This wasn't the life I had planned, but perhaps it would be better than the one I had been living. That evening, over dinner at Sophie's apartment, I shared the developments of the day, my meeting with Catherine, lunch with Daniel, and the unexpected confrontation with James. "So you're really doing this," Sophie said, refilling our wine glasses. "Your own company, a divorce, a complete life renovation." "Apparently so," I replied, the reality of it all still sinking in. A week ago, I was planning an anniversary party. Now I'm planning a business and a divorce. "And how does that feel?" she asked, studying me carefully. I considered the question, searching for the right words to capture the complex tangle of emotions coursing through me. "Terrifying," I admitted, "but also right. Like I've been holding my breath for years, and finally, I can exhale." Sophie raised her glass in a toast. "To exhaling, then, and to whatever comes next." Whatever comes next. The phrase echoed in my mind as we clinked glasses. For 10 years, whatever comes next had been dictated by James's career trajectory, his needs, his plans. Now, for the first time in a decade, my future was entirely my own to shape. It was the most frightening and exhilarating realization of my life. 6 weeks after the anniversary party that had so publicly ended my marriage, I stood in the doorway of what would soon become the headquarters of Parker Events and Experiences. The space was raw, exposed brick walls, concrete floors, and towering windows that flooded the open floor plan with natural light. But I could see what it would become. A creative hub where vision would transform into reality, where celebrations would be crafted with the same care and attention to detail I had once lavished on building James's perfect image. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, watching my reaction closely. "It's perfect," I replied, stepping further into the space, already mentally placing desks, meeting areas, and the large design table I had envisioned for collaborative planning sessions. "How did you find it?" "I own the building," he said with a casual shrug. "Was renovating the first floor for a new bistro concept when this second floor space opened up. Seemed like perfect timing." Perfect timing indeed. Ever since I had accepted Daniel's offer to back my new venture, things had fallen into place with a synchronicity that felt almost magical after years of compromising and adjusting my dreams to fit James's expectations. The business plan had been finalized within days of our lunch meeting. The preliminary client list, comprised largely of connections I had cultivated during my years as the perfect corporate wife, had grown exponentially once word spread that I was striking out on my own. The branding materials Daniel had mockingly developed had been refined with my input, resulting in an identity that felt both luxurious and approachable. And now, this space, the physical embodiment of my new beginning. "The lease terms are in the contract," Daniel continued, handing me a folder. "Standard rate for the area, but I've included 6 months free to give you time to establish the, business properly." I opened the folder, scanning the terms. "This is generous, Daniel." "It's strategic," he corrected, though his smile softened the words. "Your success benefits us both." That was what I appreciated most about working with Daniel, the straightforward business approach underlying his support. Unlike James, who had couched his self-interest in declarations of love and partnership, Daniel was refreshingly transparent about his motives. Yes, he stood to profit from my success, but there was no pretense, no manipulation disguised as concern. "We'll need to move quickly on the renovations if we want to meet our launch timeline," I said, already transitioning to planning mode. "I've lined up an interior designer, but we'll need contractors, permits." "Already handled," Daniel interrupted. "My team from the downstairs renovation can shift focus here. They're familiar with the building's quirks, and they've worked with the city permit office before." I blinked, momentarily taken aback by this efficiency. "You seem very confident that I'd take the space." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "I've learned to recognize determination when I see it, Emma. From the moment you stood up at that party and announced your new direction, I knew you wouldn't look back. The memory of that night still stung. The public humiliation, the shock, the sickening realization that my marriage had been a facade for longer than I cared to admit. But Daniel was right. From the moment I had reclaimed my voice in that ballroom, I had been moving forward, not back. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Catherine Reed. I glanced at it quickly, then looked up with a smile that felt almost predatory. "Good news?" Daniel asked, noting my expression. "The best. James's request for an expedited division of assets has been denied. The judge is requiring full financial disclosure, including a forensic accounting of our joint finances for the past 5 years." Daniel whistled low. "That's not what he wanted, I'm guessing." "Not at all," I confirmed, satisfaction warming my voice. "James has always kept our finances somewhat opaque, managing investments, handling tax preparations, setting up accounts I barely knew existed. Catherine thinks he's been hiding assets. And now he can't hide them anymore," Daniel concluded. "Well played." It wasn't about the money, not really. Over the past weeks, as Catherine had helped me untangle the complex web of our shared financial life, I had discovered just how systematically James had established control. Joint accounts I had limited access to. Investment portfolios managed exclusively by him. Even our tax returns, which I had signed dutifully each year, contained deductions and allocations I had never fully understood. "When this is over," I said, tucking my phone away, "I want exactly what I've earned. No more, no less." Daniel nodded, respecting the steel that had gradually replaced the shock in my voice when discussing my failing marriage. "Speaking of earning," he said, changing the subject, "have you considered who you'll hire first? You can't build an empire alone." "Actually, I have someone in mind," I replied, thinking of the conversation I'd had the previous evening. "Jessica Moore. She was an intern at Preston and Associates when I was there. Brilliant organizational mind, creative but practical. She reached out after hearing about my new venture." "Poaching from your old firm?" Daniel asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Bold move. Not exactly poaching, more like rescue. The new event director they hired after I left has been running the department into the ground. Jessica's looking for an exit." This wasn't mere speculation. Noah, still my inside source at James's firm, had kept me apprised of the ripple effects of my departure. The prestigious events that had once been my hallmark were now characterized by missed details, lackluster execution, and growing client dissatisfaction. The new director, handpicked by Richard Jenkins, the managing partner who had always undervalued my contributions, lacked both my attention to detail and my extensive network of vendors and venues. "I'm meeting with her tomorrow," I continued. "If she's as good as I remember, she'll be my first hire." "And your old firm's first casualty," Daniel noted. "The beginning of a pattern, perhaps?" I didn't respond directly, but we both knew he was right. Already, several clients I had cultivated during my years supporting James's career had reached out about transitioning their event needs to my new company. I hadn't actively solicited their business. I didn't need to. Quality spoke for itself, and the lackluster execution of recent events at Mitchell & Grant had spoken volumes. As we continued touring the space, discussing renovation timelines and design concepts, I felt a buzzing energy that had nothing to do with the phone periodically vibrating in my pocket. This was the thrill of creation, of building something that was wholly mine, a sensation I had almost forgotten in the years spent supporting James's ambitions while neglecting my own. That evening, back at the apartment I had leased after moving out of Sophie's guest room, a sleek, modern space overlooking the river, as different from the Lakeside Heights home as possible, I settled in for my weekly call with Noah. These conversations had become a ritual, a window into the world I had left behind. "You're not going to believe this," Noah began without preamble when I answered. James lost the Westridge account today. I sat straighter, genuinely surprised. Westridge Investments had been James's biggest client, the cornerstone of his rapid ascent to partnership. What happened? The official story is that they decided to consolidate their legal work with another firm, Noah replied, his voice low despite the privacy of his location. The unofficial story is that Margaret Westridge was at your anniversary party. She didn't appreciate how James handled things. Margaret Westridge, formidable CEO, notorious stickler for propriety, and one of the few female executives in a male-dominated industry. I had always made a point of engaging with her personally at firm events, recognizing in her the same careful navigation of gender politics I performed in my own way. She specifically cited the incident? I asked, choosing my words carefully. Not directly, but the timing isn't coincidental. And Lauren from Client Services overheard her telling Richard that she questions the judgment of a man who would publicly humiliate his wife of 10 years. A small vindicative part of me rejoiced at this news. The rational, forward-looking part recognized it for what it was, the beginning of the professional consequences Catherine had predicted. "How's James taking it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Noah snorted. "How do you think? He spent an hour in Richard's office with the door closed. When he came out, he looked like he'd been put through a wood chipper." I should have felt sympathy, perhaps. After all, I had spent 10 years investing in James's career success. But the memory of his casual cruelty at our anniversary party. She does a lot more than you already, Kathy, effectively smothered any empathetic impulse. "And, Olivia," I asked, the name still bitter on my tongue, "is she enjoying being the new Mrs. Parker in waiting?" There was a pause, then Noah's carefully measured response. "Actually, I'm not sure they're still together. She hasn't been to any firm events lately, and James took Sarah from the tax department to the client dinner last night." This was unexpected and oddly deflating. I had imagined James and Olivia moving forward together, the relationship he had deemed worth destroying our marriage for blossoming in my absence. The thought that he might have already moved on to someone else made the entire debacle seem even more pointless. "Emma?" Noah prompted when I didn't immediately respond. "You still there?" "Yes, sorry." I shook off the momentary disorientation. "Just processing." "For what it's worth," Noah continued, his voice gentler now, "everyone misses you. The Marshall Foundation is threatening to move their annual gala elsewhere because the planning this year is such a disaster." The Marshall Foundation Gala, my crowning achievement from the previous year, an event that had raised record donations and cemented my reputation as one of the city's premier event planners. Its success had directly led to Daniel's offer. "They should call me," I said, only half joking. "Parker Events and Experiences would be happy to help." "Maybe they will," Noah replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Word is getting around about your new venture. Richard looked like he'd swallowed a lemon when your name came up in the partners' meeting yesterday." We chatted for a while longer, Noah sharing the latest firm gossip while I offered updates on my new business preparations. When we finally hung up, I found myself staring at the city lights visible from my living room window, reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. 6 weeks ago, I had been planning an anniversary celebration for a marriage that was already dead. Now I was founding a company, navigating a high-profile divorce, and discovering a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The pain was still there. The humiliation, the betrayal, the loss of the future I had imagined. But it was increasingly overshadowed by something else. Possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Drinks tomorrow after your meeting with Jessica? Need full report?" On space and all the drama. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Sophie had been my rock through this upheaval, offering her guest room when I needed shelter, her shoulder when I needed comfort, and her unflinching honesty when I needed perspective. She alone had seen me in the immediate aftermath, raw, wounded, disoriented, and she had never once suggested that I try to salvage what James had so publicly discarded. "You deserve better," she had said simply on that first night, "and now you have the chance to find it." Better. The word echoed in my mind as I prepared for bed. Better than a marriage built on compromise that flowed primarily in one direction. Better than being valued primarily for how my skills enhanced someone else's image. Better than loving someone who could announce his infidelity at an event I had spent months planning. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that matched my mood as I prepared to meet Jessica Moore at a cafe near my new office space. I arrived early, claiming a quiet table in the corner and ordering my usual latte. While waiting, I reviewed the preliminary sketches the interior designer had sent over for the office renovation. Clean lines, a sophisticated palette of blues and grays, with strategic pops of color to energize the space. "Emma?" A voice interrupted my concentration. "Emma Parker?" I looked up to see a woman I didn't immediately recognize. Early 40s, stylishly, dressed with an expression of uncertain recognition. "Yes?" I responded, setting aside my tablet. "I'm Diane Westridge," she said, extending her hand. "Margaret's daughter-in-law. We met at the Mitchell and Grant holiday party last year." "Of course," I said, the connection clicking into place. "How are you, Diane?" "Wonderful, thank you." She hesitated, then asked, "May I join you for a moment?" "Please." I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about this unexpected encounter. Diane settled into the seat, setting her coffee cup on the table between us. "I'll be direct," she said after a moment. "I was at your anniversary party." My stomach tightened automatically at the reference, but I kept my expression neutral. "I remember seeing you there." "What happened was—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Unforgivable. The way your husband treated you, in public no less, was beyond inappropriate." "Thank you," I said simply, unsure where this conversation was headed. "The reason I'm approaching you now is that I've heard you're starting your own event planning company." She leaned forward, slightly. "My mother-in-law was extremely impressed with the Marshall Foundation Gala you organized last year. When she learned about your new venture, she suggested I speak with you." My eyebrows rose slightly. "About?" "The Westridge Family Foundation is launching a new initiative focused on supporting women entrepreneurs," Diane explained. "We're planning a major fundraising event in the fall. Something to draw attention and initial investment. Margaret thought you might be the perfect person to handle it." The irony was almost too perfect. James had lost the Westridge account, while I was being offered their foundation business. If I believed in cosmic justice, this would certainly qualify. "I'd be very interested in discussing this further," I said, professionalism overtaking my initial surprise. "My company is in the startup phase, but will be fully operational well before fall." "Excellent." Diane smiled, reaching into her handbag for a business card. "Call my office next week to set up a proper meeting. Margaret would like to be involved in the initial discussions." As she stood to leave, she hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "For what it's worth, the Westridge family values loyalty and integrity above all else. Those qualities extend to how we choose our business partners as well as our legal representation." The message couldn't have been clearer. James's public betrayal had cost him more than his marriage. It had cost him professional standing with one of his most important clients. I watched Diane leave, her card a tangible reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. One door closes, another opens. The platitude I had dismissed as empty comfort now seemed prophetic. Jessica arrived precisely on time, her eager enthusiasm evident as we discussed the position I was offering. Young, talented, and clearly undervalued at Preston and Associates, she represented exactly the kind of team member I wanted to build my company around. Someone with both skill and hunger to prove themselves. "I can start in 2 weeks," she said, after I had outlined the role and compensation package. "My current contract requires 10 business days' notice." "Perfect timing," I replied, thinking of the office renovations scheduled to be completed within the month. "That gives us time to finalize the space and develop our initial marketing strategy." As we continued discussing logistics, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Catherine Reed. I excused myself briefly to take it. "Emma," Catherine's crisp voice came through clearly. "I have news. James has agreed to our terms regarding the house." I blinked, genuinely surprised. James had been fighting tooth and nail for our Lakeside Heights home, arguing that his status as the primary breadwinner entitled him to retain the property. "What changed his mind?" I asked, stepping away from the table for privacy. Apparently, his financial disclosures revealed some irregularities that he'd preferred not to have scrutinized too closely. There was a note of satisfaction in Catherine's voice. "I suspect he's decided that keeping the house isn't worth the risk of a more thorough investigation." "Irregularities?" I repeated, my mind racing. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that might interest the IRS," Catherine replied delicately. "Nothing definitive yet, but enough to make him suddenly amenable to negotiation." I absorbed this information, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and disbelief. Had James been engaging in financial impropriety during our marriage? Had I been so focused on supporting his career that I had missed signs of ethical lapses? "So the house is mine?" I confirmed, focusing on the immediate outcome rather than the troubling implications. "We're drawing up the transfer documents now," Catherine confirmed. "He'll assume the outstanding mortgage debt as part of the settlement, but the property will be transferred solely to your name." After concluding the call, I returned to Jessica, who was politely pretending not to have noticed my sudden change in demeanor. "Good news?" she asked cautiously. "Very good news," I confirmed, not elaborating further. Now, where were we? The remainder of our meeting flowed smoothly, Jessica's enthusiasm for the new position matching my growing excitement about building a team that shared my vision. By the time we parted, Jessica to submit her resignation, me to meet Sophie for our promised drink, I felt a buoyancy that had once seemed permanently beyond my reach. Sophie was already waiting at our favorite wine bar when I arrived, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket at her table. "We're celebrating?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Every damn day you're not married to that ass anymore," she replied, popping the cork with practiced ease. "Plus, I had a feeling today would bring good news." As she poured 2 flutes of bubbling champagne, I filled her in on the day's developments, the promising meeting with Jessica, the unexpected encounter with Diane Westridge, and Catherine's call about the house. "Financial irregularities?" Sophie repeated, her eyebrows shooting upward. "Like what?" Catherine was deliberately vague, but she implied potential tax issues. I sipped my champagne, still processing this revelation. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. If James could lie about something as fundamental as fidelity, why not finances too? "Because one might land him in jail," Sophie pointed out. "Though personally, I think both should." I laughed, the sound freer and more genuine than it had been in months. "I don't want him in jail, Sophie. I just want what's rightfully mine, and it looks like I'm getting it." "And then some," she added, tapping her glass against mine. "The Westridge Foundation account? That's poetic justice if I've ever seen it." We spent the next hour chatting about lighter topics, the office renovations, potential names for the conference rooms. Sophie lobbied hard for the Phoenix for the main meeting space, a not-so-subtle reference to my rising from the ashes of my marriage and her latest dating adventures. Speaking of dating, Sophie segued after recounting a particularly disastrous coffee meetup. What's the situation with Daniel? Are you two business partners? I finished firmly. That's all. Sophie looked skeptical. He's single, successful, and clearly in awe of your abilities. Plus, he's been calling in favors all over town to help get your business off the ground. That's a lot of effort for just a business partner. It's called investment, I countered. He has a financial stake in my success. Mm-hmm. Sophie's tone made it clear she wasn't convinced. And the way he looks at you whenever you're in the same room? Is that financial too? I felt a flush creeping up my neck that had nothing to do with the champagne. I'm not ready for that, Sophie. I'm still legally married, still dealing with the fallout from James's betrayal. The last thing I need is to complicate my professional relationship with Daniel by introducing whatever you're implying. Fair enough, she conceded, refilling our glasses. But when you are ready, and eventually you will be, just remember I called it first. I rolled my eyes but didn't argue further. The truth was, I had noticed Daniel's attentiveness, his genuine interest in my ideas, his unwavering support of my vision. Under different circumstances that didn't include a pending divorce and a business partnership, perhaps I would have been open to exploring the chemistry that occasionally sparked between us. But for now, my focus remained singular, building a life that was wholly mine, independent of any man's validation or support. What about the gala? Sophie asked, shifting topics. The one Noah said is a disaster without you? The Marshall Foundation? I considered the question. If they reach out, I'll certainly discuss taking it on, but I'm not going to pursue it actively. That would look desperate. It's not desperate to reclaim what you built, Sophie countered. That event was your baby. Everyone knows you were the reason it succeeded last year. True, but timing matters. I want to approach any former clients from a position of strength, not need. I swirled the remaining champagne in my glass. Besides, from what Noah tells me, they'll be coming to me soon enough on their own. As if summoned by the mention of his name, my phone lit up with a text from Noah. Emergency partners meeting. Tomorrow morning. Word is more clients leaving. Jay looks like death warmed over. I showed the message to Sophie, who read it with undisguised satisfaction. Karma's a bitch, she said simply, and apparently, she works fast. It's not just karma, I said, tucking my phone away. It's consequences. James built his reputation on a foundation that included my work, my connections, my support. Remove those elements, and the structure was bound to weaken. Plus, Sophie added with a wicked grin, everyone in town now knows he's the kind of guy who announces his affair at his anniversary party. Not exactly a ringing endorsement of his judgment or character. We finished the bottle of champagne, parting with promises to meet again after my upcoming consultation with Margaret and Diane Westridge. As I hailed a rideshare back to my apartment, I found myself reflecting on the trajectory my life had taken in such a short time. From humiliated wife to emerging entrepreneur, from supporting player to leading role. The pain of James's betrayal hadn't disappeared. I doubted it ever would completely. But it had transformed from a crippling wound into something more productive, a catalyst for change, a reminder of my own resilience. In the quiet of the car, watching the city lights blur past the window, I allowed myself a moment of pure, uncomplicated gratitude. Not for James's betrayal, certainly, but for the freedom it had ultimately granted me. Freedom to pursue my own ambitions, to reclaim my own voice, to build a life that reflected my values rather than someone else's expectations. It wasn't the path I would have chosen, but increasingly I was grateful for where it was leading. 3 months after founding Parker Events and Experiences, I stood at the entrance of the Marshall Foundation Gala, watching as elegantly dressed guests streamed into the transformed ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, cast a warm glow over tables adorned with cascading orchid arrangements. A string quartet played softly near the champagne fountain that served as the room's centerpiece. Every detail was perfect, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the custom lighting that made everyone look their most radiant. "You've outdone yourself," Margaret Westridge said, appearing at my elbow in a striking midnight blue gown. "Even better than last year." "Thank you," I replied, genuine pride warming my voice. We had an exceptional team. "Your team," she emphasized, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Your vision." 3 weeks after my chance encounter with Diane Westridge, the Marshall Foundation had indeed reached out, desperate for help after their original planner, my replacement at Preston and Associates, had delivered a proposal that was, in the foundation director's words, utterly lacking in imagination or understanding of our goals. I had accepted the contract with quiet satisfaction, knowing that this event would serve as the perfect showcase for my new company's capabilities. What I hadn't anticipated was how many other clients would follow suit, abandoning their relationships with my former employer to work with me directly. "The Westridge Foundation event is coming together nicely as well," Margaret continued, referring to the Women Entrepreneurs Initiative her family was launching. "Diane is very impressed with your proposals." "I'm glad to hear it," I said, genuinely pleased. The Westridge account had become the cornerstone of my new business, a high-profile, prestigious client whose endorsement carried significant weight in our city's social circles. As Margaret moved away to greet other guests, I felt a presence at my side. Daniel, impeccable in his tuxedo, offered me a flute of champagne. "To triumph," he said quietly, tapping his glass against mine. I took a sip, the bubbles dancing on my tongue. "It's just one event, Daniel." "False modesty doesn't suit you," he chided gently. "Look around. Half the city's power players are here, watching you rise from the ashes of public humiliation to even greater heights. This isn't just an event, it's a statement." He wasn't wrong. In the months since James's devastating announcement at our anniversary party, I had channeled every ounce of hurt and anger into building something remarkable. Parker events and experiences had expanded faster than even Daniel's optimistic projections, requiring me to hire not just Jessica, but 3 additional staff members. We had moved into our renovated office space ahead of schedule, the exposed brick walls now adorned with framed photographs of our successful events and testimonials from delighted clients. "Speaking of statements," Daniel continued, his voice dropping lower, "your ex-husband just arrived, with a date who is definitely not the girlfriend he announced at your party." I followed his gaze to the entrance, where James stood awkwardly scanning the room. Beside him was a woman I recognized as Sarah from his firm's tax department, the same woman Noah had mentioned James taking to a client dinner weeks ago. There was no sign of Olivia, the woman for whom he had so publicly ended our marriage. "Interesting," I murmured, taking another sip of champagne. "I didn't realize he was on the guest list." "He's representing Mitchell and Grant," Daniel explained. "They're still major donors, despite everything." I nodded, unsurprised. The foundation would not jeopardize significant financial support over personal drama, nor would I have expected them to. But the fact that James had been sent as the firm's representative rather than Richard or another senior partner spoke volumes about his diminished standing. "Should I run interference?" Daniel offered, his protective instinct evident. "I can keep him occupied on the other side of the room." I smiled, touched by the gesture but unwilling to show any sign that James's presence affected me. "That won't be necessary. This is my event. My triumph, as you put it. I'm not going to hide." Daniel studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Of course not, but the offer stands if you change your mind." As he moved away to greet other guests, I took a deep breath and smoothed the skirt of my gown, a stunning creation in deep emerald that made my eyes look luminous and my skin glow. It was a far cry from the safe, conservative dresses I had worn as James's wife, selected to complement but never outshine him. Tonight, I was the focal point, the center of attention, the woman everyone wanted to speak with, not because of who I was married to, but because of what I had created. For the next hour, I circulated through the room, checking on details, greeting donors, and ensuring everything ran according to plan. I was acutely aware of James's presence but made no effort to approach or avoid him. This neutral ground, a charity event filled with witnesses, was perhaps the safest place for our inevitable first post-divorce encounter. The divorce had been finalized just 1 week earlier, the process accelerated by James's surprising capitulation to most of my demands. The house was mine. The investment portfolio had been divided equitably. The only real point of contention had been the art collection we had amassed during our marriage, pieces I had carefully selected to reflect our supposed shared aesthetic. In the end, we had divided it by mutual agreement, though I had insisted on keeping the abstract expressionist piece that had been my favorite, a swirl of colors that had once represented hope and possibility to me. As the evening progressed, and dinner was served, I found myself seated at a table with the foundation's board members, deliberately placed far from James. I caught him glancing in my direction several times, his expression unreadable. Sarah, his date, looked uncomfortable, constantly smoothing her hair or adjusting her dress in small, nervous gestures that betrayed her awareness of the awkward situation. After the main course had been cleared and before dessert was served, Anthony Marshall, the foundation's elderly but sharp-witted president, rose to deliver his customary address. He thanked the donors, highlighted the past year's accomplishments, and outlined ambitious goals for the coming year. Then, to my surprise, he turned in my direction. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge Emma Parker, whose extraordinary vision and flawless execution has made this evening possible. He raised his glass. After a last-minute change in planning, Emma stepped in and transformed what could have been a disaster into what I believe is our most successful gala to date. Emma, on behalf of the entire foundation, thank you. The room erupted in applause. I felt a flush of pleasure as I acknowledged the recognition with a modest nod. From across the room, I caught James's gaze, his expression a complex mixture of surprise, discomfort, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps? Or simple recognition that I was thriving without him. As the applause died down and dessert was served, my phone vibrated with a text from Noah. Check your email, urgent. Excusing myself from the table, I stepped into a quiet alcove off the main ballroom to check my messages. Noah had forwarded an internal email from Mitchell and Grant, sent firm-wide just an hour earlier. Effective immediately, James Parker has resigned his position as partner at Mitchell and Grant to pursue other opportunities. Client matters previously handled by Mr. Parker will be reassigned to appropriate partners. Please direct any questions to Richard Jenkins. I stared at the screen, momentarily stunned. Resigned? According to Noah's intelligence over the past weeks, James had been struggling professionally, but nowhere near the point of resignation. Something must have happened, something significant enough to prompt such a dramatic move. A second text from Noah popped up. Word is he was asked to resign, something about financial improprieties that came to light during your divorce proceedings. Richard is in damage control mode. The pieces fell into place. The irregularities Catherine had mentioned, James's sudden willingness to settle our divorce quickly and largely on my terms, and now this abrupt resignation. Whatever James had been hiding, it had finally caught up with him. I should have felt vindicated, perhaps even triumphant. Instead, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice had been served, certainly, but also a tinge of sadness for the man I had once loved, the future we had once planned together, all of it now irrevocably lost. Stepping back into the ballroom, I noticed James rising from his table, saying something to Sarah before making his way toward the exit. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room. For a moment, I thought he might approach me, might offer some explanation or acknowledgement. Instead, he simply nodded once, a gesture of recognition, of surrender perhaps, before continuing toward the door. In that moment, I realized I didn't need his explanation or acknowledgement. I had moved beyond the need for closure from James. My life had taken a new direction, one that was proving more fulfilling than the carefully circumscribed role I had played as his wife. As I returned to my table, Daniel appeared at my side, concern evident in his expression. "Everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just news from the law firm," I said quietly. "James has resigned, effective immediately." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Resigned or resigned?" "The latter, from what I hear, something about financial improprieties." He processed this information with a slow nod. "Are you okay?" It was a simple question, but one that required honest introspection. Was I okay? 3 months ago, my world had shattered in the most public, humiliating way possible. The life I had carefully constructed, the perfect marriage, the supportive wife role, the social status I had earned through years of calculated effort, had disintegrated in a single evening. Yet from those ashes, something remarkable had risen. A business that was truly mine. Relationships based on my value, not my husband's position. Freedom to make choices based on my desires rather than someone else's expectations. "Yes," I said. Finally, my voice firm. "I'm more than okay." The rest of the gala proceeded flawlessly, each element unfolding exactly as planned. When the last guest had departed and the staff began the meticulous breakdown of the event, I found myself standing, alone in the center of the ballroom, surveying what I had created. "Savoring the moment?" Sophie asked, joining me after helping coordinate the collection of auction items. She had insisted on volunteering for the event, claiming she wouldn't miss my triumph for anything. "Just thinking about how much can change in a few months," I replied, slipping off my heels with a sigh of relief. "Did you hear about James?" "Noah texted me," she confirmed. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy." I gave her a look that was half reproach, half amusement. "It's not a happy ending for anyone, Sophie. Whatever he did, it was serious enough to end his career at the firm." "Maybe," she conceded, "but I'd call tonight a pretty happy ending for you." She gestured around the room. "Sold-out gala, major new clients, standing ovation from the city's elite. Not bad for a woman whose husband humiliated her at their anniversary party just a few months ago." Put like that, it did seem like a spectacular reversal of fortune. But I knew the reality was more complex than this simple narrative of triumph over adversity. The pain of James's betrayal hadn't magically disappeared. The trust issues it had created would likely affect my future relationships for years to come. The questions about what had really been happening during our marriage, not just the infidelity, but the financial deceptions as well, might never be fully answered. Yet despite these lingering wounds, I had discovered something valuable. In the aftermath of devastation, my own resilience, my own capacity for reinvention, my own ability to thrive independently. "Earth to Emma," Sophie said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You went somewhere else for a minute there." I smiled apologetically. "Just processing. It's been an eventful night." "And it's not over yet," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Daniel is waiting to take us to the after-party at Riverview. He's reserved the rooftop lounge for your team and select VIPs, very exclusive, very chic." "I don't know, Sophie. I'm exhausted." "Exactly why you need champagne and dancing," she insisted. "This is your night, Emma. You've earned the celebration." Perhaps she was right. After months of relentless work, building my business while simultaneously dismantling my marriage, I deserved an evening of uncomplicated joy. I agreed to join the after-party, changing from my formal gown into the sleek cocktail dress Sophie had presciently brought along for this purpose. The rooftop lounge at Riverview was magical, string lights twinkling overhead, the city skyline, providing a glittering backdrop, soft music creating an atmosphere of relaxed sophistication. Daniel had indeed spared no expense, arranging for premium champagne and a curated menu of late-night delicacies prepared by the restaurant's renowned chef. To the unqualified success of Parker Events and Experiences, he toasted when I arrived, raising a glass that was quickly echoed by my team members and the select clients who had joined the celebration. As the night progressed, I found myself gradually unwinding, the tension of the past months, perhaps the past years, slowly releasing its grip. I danced with Sophie, laughed with my team, and accepted congratulations from clients who were already booking future events with my company. Near midnight, I stepped away from the festivities to take in the view from the edge of the rooftop garden. The city stretched before me, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. Somewhere out there was the house I had shared with James, now mine alone. Somewhere was the law firm where he had built his career, now closed to him. Somewhere was Olivia, the woman he had deemed worth sacrificing our marriage for, now apparently replaced in his affections. "Penny for your thoughts," Daniel said, joining me at the railing. "Though given tonight's success, they're probably worth considerably more." I smiled, accepting the fresh glass of champagne he offered. Just reflecting on how unpredictable life can be. 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future held. Now here I am, celebrating the success of a business I hadn't even conceived of then. "Having regrets?" he asked, his tone careful. "Not about leaving James, if that's what you're asking," I clarified. "But there's a certain grief in realizing that the life you planned, the future you anticipated, was built on illusions." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I can understand that. My divorce wasn't nearly as dramatic as yours, but I remember that sense of disorientation. Like the map you'd been following suddenly revealed itself to be for an entirely different territory." This was the first time Daniel had mentioned his own divorce, though I had known he was single. In the whirlwind of launching my business and finalizing my divorce, there had been little time for personal conversations that weren't directly related to work. "How long ago?" I asked, curious about this glimpse into his past. 5 years, he replied. "Long enough that the sharp edges have worn smooth. We wanted different things, ultimately. She saw my restaurant ambitions as a hobby, not a career. When the third one succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, she suddenly wanted back in." He shrugged. "By then, I'd realized we were better apart." I considered this, appreciating his candor. "No regrets? About the divorce? No. About marrying someone who didn't really see me? Maybe. It took me a long time to trust my own judgment. Again." The parallel to my situation wasn't lost on me. James had presented himself as one kind of partner, only to reveal himself as something entirely different. I too wondered how long it would take before I trusted my own judgment in relationships again. "For what it's worth," Daniel said after a comfortable silence, "I think you're handling all of this with remarkable grace. Lesser people would have crumbled under the public scrutiny or let bitterness consume them." "Oh, there's been plenty of bitterness," I admitted with a wry smile. "Just ask Sophie. She's witnessed some truly spectacular ranting sessions." "As is your right," he laughed. "But you channeled it into something constructive. That's the difference." We lapsed into another comfortable silence, watching the city below. In the 3 months we had been working together, Daniel had become more than just a financial backer. He had been a mentor, a sounding board, and increasingly, a friend. His belief in my abilities had never wavered, Not even in the immediate aftermath of James's betrayal when I myself had questioned everything. "I have something for you," he said suddenly, reaching into his jacket pocket. "A small token to commemorate tonight's success." He handed me a small box, elegantly wrapped. I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't need to get me anything, Daniel." "I know," he replied simply. "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver key on a slender chain, a beautiful piece of jewelry, but clearly symbolic rather than merely decorative. "It's lovely," I said, lifting it from the box. "But what does it open?" "Nothing literal," he explained. "It's tradition in my family. When someone starts a new chapter in their life, a new business, a new home, a true fresh start, they receive a key to represent the doors they're opening. My grandfather gave one to my father when he opened his first restaurant. My father gave one to me when I opened mine." I was touched by the sentiment, by the inclusion in what was clearly a meaningful family tradition. "Thank you," I said softly. "That's incredibly thoughtful." "May I?" he asked, taking the necklace and moving to fasten it around my neck when I nodded. As his fingers brushed my skin, I felt a flutter of awareness that had nothing to do with business partnership. In the months we had worked together, I had deliberately maintained professional boundaries, too focused on establishing my company and finalizing my divorce to consider any other kind of relationship. But now, with the divorce finalized and the business thriving, I found myself noticing things I had previously pushed aside. The warmth of his smile, the steadiness of his support, the easy comfort of his company. "There," he said, stepping back to admire the key now resting just below my collarbone. "Perfect." Before I could respond, Sophie's voice called out from the bar area. "Emma! Get over here! They're bringing out the cake!" The moment, whatever it might have become, was broken. But as Daniel and I rejoined the party, I was acutely conscious of his presence beside me, of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider until now. The cake, it turned out, was an elaborate creation designed to look like the logo of Parker Events and Experiences, complete with edible gold detailing and tiny sugar flowers. My team gathered around, phones out to capture the moment as I made the ceremonial first cut. "Speech!" Jessica called out, her enthusiasm echoed by the others. Put on the spot, I looked around at the faces that had become so important to me in such a short time. My team, who had taken a chance on a brand new company. Sophie, whose unwavering support had sustained me through the darkest moments. Daniel, whose belief in my abilities had made this new chapter possible. And the clients, who had entrusted their important events to my fledgling business. "A few months ago," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion welling within me. "I stood in a different ballroom, experiencing what felt like the end of my world. Everything I had built, everything I thought I knew about my life, was suddenly revealed to be an illusion." The room quieted, everyone aware of the story but hearing my perspective for the first time. In that moment, I had a choice. I could crumble under the humiliation, or I could use it as a catalyst to create something new. Thanks to all of you, your support, your trust, your belief in me, I was able to choose the latter. I raised my glass, looking each person in the eye. To new beginnings, to doors closing and others opening, to the beautiful truth that sometimes, when we lose what we thought we wanted, we find what we truly need. The toast was met with enthusiastic agreement, glasses clinking as conversations resumed. As I circulated through the small gathering, accepting congratulations and discussing future plans, I felt a sense of completion, of a circle closing. The journey from that devastating anniversary party to this moment of celebration had been relatively brief in chronological terms, but immeasurable in personal growth. Near the end of the evening, as guests began to depart and the energy started to wane, My phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it immediately. James. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. What could he possibly have to say that would matter now? What explanation or justification could change the reality of what had happened? After a moment's deliberation, I declined the call. Whatever James wanted, closure, forgiveness, another chance, would have to wait for another time, if ever. Tonight was about celebrating how far I had come, not revisiting the betrayal that had set this journey in motion. Almost immediately, a text message appeared. Emma, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to explain. What? I did, not just at the party but after, was unforgivable. The truth is finally catching up with me, as you've probably heard. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I stared at the message, feeling strangely unmoved. A few months ago, these words might have mattered. Now they seemed hollow, too little too late. I didn't respond, simply putting the phone away and rejoining the celebration. Everything okay? Daniel asked, noticing my momentary distraction. Yes, I said, and meant it. Everything is exactly as it should be. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, I found myself reluctant to leave, to end this perfect evening. Sophie had already gone, whisked away by a rideshare after extracting a promise that we would have brunch the following day to dissect every minute of the gala's success. My team had dispersed as well, tired but exhilarated by what we had accomplished, together. Only Daniel remained, overseeing the closing of the tab and thanking the staff for their excellent service. When everything was settled, he joined me at the edge of the rooftop garden where I had been watching the city lights slowly dim as dawn approached. "Shall I call you a car?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not just yet. I'm not quite ready to leave." He nodded, understanding without explanation my reluctance to end this magical night. "In that case, would you care to dance? One last celebration before reality intrudes." The rooftop was now empty save for us, the music still playing softly in the background. I hesitated only briefly before accepting his outstretched hand. As we moved slowly to the gentle melody, I felt the rightness of this moment. Not a desperate rebound or a business relationship crossing inappropriate lines, but two people who had come to genuinely respect and care for each other, acknowledging the possibility of something more. "I'm not ready," I said softly, wanting to be honest, "for anything beyond friendship and our business partnership." "I know," he replied, his voice equally gentle. "I'm not asking for more than you're ready to give, but I want you to know that when you are ready, if you're ever interested in exploring what might be between us, I'll be here." The simple acknowledgement of mutual attraction, of potential, of the need for time, was perhaps the most thoughtful gift I had received in years. No pressure, no demands, just honest recognition of feelings that might, in time, develop into something meaningful. "Thank you," I said, resting my head against his shoulder as we continued to dance. "For everything." As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky with delicate hues of pink and gold, I realized that this moment of peaceful possibility, of open doors and unwritten futures, was the true antithesis of that horrible anniversary night. Not triumph or revenge or even professional success, but the simple, profound recognition that I was now free to write my own story, to choose my own path, to create a life aligned with my authentic self rather than someone else's expectations. When James had stood up at our anniversary party and announced his relationship with Olivia, he had thought he was closing a door, ending a chapter in his life while opening a new one. What he hadn't realized, what perhaps neither of us had understood at the time, was that his announcement had liberated us both, albeit in vastly different ways. For him, it had led to professional disgrace and personal chaos. For me, it had paved the way to self-discovery, professional fulfillment, and genuine independence. As Daniel and I finally parted ways in the soft light of early morning, I fingered the silver key that now hung around my neck. Doors closing, doors opening. Chapters ending, chapters beginning. The poetry of life continuing, often in ways we never anticipate. The woman who had stood frozen in shock as her husband announced his infidelity at their anniversary party was gone, transformed by fire into someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more self-possessed. In her place stood a woman who had discovered that sometimes the most devastating endings lead to the most extraordinary beginnings. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all. 1 year later, the evening air was crisp as I stepped out of my car in front of the Bellamy Hotel. A sense of déjà vu washed over me. 1 year ago, I had arrived at this same venue in a different state of mind, with a different name, and carrying very different expectations. Now, returning as Emma Parker, founder and CEO of the city's most sought-after event planning company, I felt the poetic symmetry of the moment. "Ms. Parker, welcome back," the doorman greeted me, his recognition immediate. "They're waiting for you inside." I thanked him with a warm smile, taking a moment to straighten the lapels of my crimson power suit. A far cry from the demure dress I would have chosen during my marriage. The confident woman who strode through those revolving doors bore little resemblance to the one who had entered them a year before, expecting to celebrate her 10th anniversary only to be publicly humiliated. The grand ballroom had been transformed for tonight's Westridge Foundation Women's Initiative Gala, my most ambitious project to date. Soft amber lighting created an intimate atmosphere despite the vast space. Living walls of greenery and delicate, white flowers formed natural partitions throughout the room, creating conversation nooks without disrupting the overall flow. At the center, a circular stage surrounded by concentric rings of tables enabled every guest to feel connected to the evening's presentations. "There she is," Diane Westridge called out, waving me over to where she stood with a group of the foundation's board members. The visionary herself. As I joined them, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server, I couldn't help but reflect on how thoroughly my life had changed. Parker events and experiences had expanded beyond my wildest projections, requiring a move to larger offices just 6 months after opening. My team had grown to 12 full-time employees, plus a roster of specialized contractors. We had become the premier event planning company in the city, with a waiting list of clients eager to experience our particular blend of creativity and flawless execution. "I was just telling everyone about your idea for the mentorship announcement," Diane continued, her enthusiasm evident. "The interactive element is going to generate exactly the kind of engagement we're hoping for." I smiled, pride warming my chest. The Westridge Women's Initiative had developed into much more than a simple client relationship. It had become a passion project, aligned perfectly with my own journey of independence and reinvention. Tonight's gala would unveil a mentorship program, pairing established women entrepreneurs with promising startups, creating a network of support that I wished had existed when I was rebuilding my life from scratch. "Everything looks incredible," Margaret Westridge said, joining our circle. "You've managed to capture exactly the essence we discussed, empowering without being heavy-handed, elegant yet accessible." "That's Emma's specialty," Daniel remarked, appearing at my side with an appreciative glance around the room. "Finding the perfect balance." Our eyes met briefly, an undercurrent of understanding passing between us. In the year since my divorce had been finalized, our relationship had evolved cautiously, deliberately. The business partnership remained primary, but we had gradually allowed ourselves to explore the personal connection that had been evident from the beginning. Weekend brunches had led to evening dinners. Professional respect had deepened into genuine affection. And 3 months ago, I had finally felt ready to acknowledge what had been building between us. "Balance is overrated," I replied with a playful smile. "I prefer harmony. different elements working together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. A philosophy that extends beyond event planning, I see, Margaret observed, shrewdly, her gaze shifting between Daniel and me. Before I could respond, Jessica approached with tablet in hand, her expression professionally composed, but with an underlying urgency I had learned to recognize. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we have a situation with the keynote speaker's travel arrangements. Her flight's been delayed, and we need to adjust the evening's timeline." "Excuse me," I said to the group, immediately shifting into problem-solving mode. "Duty calls." As I walked away with Jessica, already discussing contingency options, I caught Daniel's admiring glance. This was what had drawn us together. Not desperation or rebound, but mutual respect for each other's competence and drive. Unlike James, who had viewed my capabilities primarily in terms of how they could enhance his image, Daniel saw my success as something to celebrate rather than compete with. The keynote speaker issue was resolved efficiently, a quick rearrangement of the program, a few strategic calls, and arrangement for private transportation from the airport. When I returned to the main floor, guests had begun to arrive in earnest, the room quickly filling with the city's most influential women and their supporters. Sophie found me near the entrance, stunning in an electric blue jumpsuit that perfectly complemented her bold personality. "Look at you," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Running the show like the queen you are." "Hardly a queen," I laughed. "More like an extremely well-organized juggler." "Same difference," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "The point is, you built this. All of it." She gestured around the room. "1 year ago, you were shell-shocked and sleeping in my guest room. Now you're the most sought-after event planner in the city, dating the hottest restaurateur and hosting galas that everyone is desperate to attend. If that's not a glow-up, I don't know what is." Her characterization made me smile, though it simplified the complex, often painful journey of the past year. Sophie had witnessed the tears, the moments of doubt, the late-night anxiety attacks, when the weight of starting over had felt overwhelming. She had also been my fiercest advocate, pushing me forward when I might have retreated into safer, smaller ambitions. "Speaking of your hot restaurateur," Sophie continued, nodding toward where Daniel stood chatting with a group of investors, "when are you two going to make things official? The suspense is killing me." I rolled my eyes at her persistence. "Some of us prefer to take things slowly, Sophie. Not everyone needs to move in together after 3 dates." "That was one time," she protested, though her grin belied any real offense. And in my defense, he was an architect with an incredible penthouse. Our banter was interrupted by the arrival of a face I hadn't expected to see. Noah, looking somewhat out of place without his usual entourage of law firm colleagues. "Noah," I greeted him, genuine pleasure in my voice. "I didn't realize you were on the guest list." "Last-minute addition," he explained. "I'm here representing the firm's new community engagement initiative. Richard thought it would be good optics to support women in business." "How progressive of him," Sophie remarked dryly. Noah's smile was diplomatic, but knowing. In the aftermath of James's departure from Mitchell & Grant, Noah had maintained our friendship, becoming an occasional consultant for Parker events and experiences when legal advice was needed. He had also kept me peripherally informed of developments at the firm, including the comprehensive damage control undertaken in the wake of James's financial improprieties. "How are things at the firm?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than seeking gossip. "Different," Noah replied with characteristic understatement. "Richard's been humbled by the whole experience, losing major clients, then discovering a partner was engaged in questionable practices. It's changed the culture. Somewhat." I nodded, understanding the delicacy of his position. Whatever James had done, and I still didn't know the full extent of it, had clearly necessitated significant restructuring at Mitchell & Grant. According to Noah's carefully worded updates over the months, several client accounts had been scrutinized for irregularities, and systems had been put in place to prevent similar situations in the future. And James? The question slipped out before I could reconsider. Have you heard anything? Noah hesitated, clearly weighing his response. He's in Chicago, I believe, working for a much smaller firm, keeping a low profile. I absorbed this information with a curious detachment. The man who had once been the center of my world, whose approval and satisfaction had dictated so many of my choices, was now reduced to a distant figure barely worth a passing thought. The realization was liberating. Enough about ancient history, Sophie declared, linking her arm through Noah's. I want to hear more about this community engagement initiative. Does it involve any events that might require professional planning services? As she guided Noah away, clearly on a reconnaissance mission for potential business opportunities, I found myself momentarily alone, a rare occurrence at an event of this magnitude. I took the opportunity to survey my creation, to appreciate fully what I had accomplished. The room pulsed with energy and purpose. Women who had built businesses, shattered glass ceilings, and carved paths for others to follow, mingled with younger entrepreneurs hungry for guidance and opportunity. The atmosphere was electric with possibility, exactly what I had envisioned when pitching the concept to Margaret and Diane months earlier. This, I realized, was what I had been born to create. Not just beautiful environments or seamless events, but meaningful experiences that connected people, that facilitated change, that opened doors previously closed. For years, I had channeled that talent into advancing James's career, into being the perfect corporate wife whose skills enhanced her husband's image rather than building her own. Never again. The evening progressed flawlessly, each element unfolding with precision despite the last-minute adjustments. The keynote speaker arrived just in time, her powerful address on resilience and reinvention resonating deeply with the audience and with me personally. The mentorship program announcement generated exactly the enthusiastic response we had hoped for, with sign-ups exceeding projections before dessert was even served. As the formal program concluded and guests moved to the adjoining room for dancing and continued networking, Daniel found me supervising the transition. Another triumph, he said, his pride evident. The Westridge family is beyond impressed. Margaret just told me they want to make this an annual event with you at the helm. That's wonderful news, I replied, making a mental note to formalize the arrangement as soon as possible. Annual events provided the stability that allowed us to take risks with more experimental projects. She also asked if I was smart enough to recognize what was right in front of me, he added, his expression amused. I believe her exact words were, "That woman is exceptional. If you don't lock that down, someone else will." I laughed, both embarrassed and flattered by Margaret's directness. "And what did you tell her?" "That I'm well aware of how exceptional you are," he replied, his tone shifting from playful to sincere. "And that I'm patient enough to move, at whatever pace feels right to you." The consideration in his words touched me deeply. Throughout our cautious exploration of romance beyond business partnership, Daniel had been respectful of my need for independence, my hesitation to rush into another relationship while still processing the lessons of my marriage. Unlike James, who had often pushed for what he wanted regardless of my feelings, Daniel consistently demonstrated that my boundaries mattered to him. "I appreciate that more than I can say," I told him, reaching for his hand. "But I've been thinking." A dangerous pastime," he teased gently. "Indeed," I agreed with a smile. "But necessary. This past year has been about rebuilding my career, my confidence, my sense of self separate from any relationship, and I needed that time." Daniel nodded, his expression attentive. "You've done it brilliantly." "Thank you, but I've realized something recently." I took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite our established comfort with each other. I don't want to keep using the past as a reason to hold back from the future. What happened with James was painful, yes, but it doesn't define what's possible with you. His eyes warmed, but he remained silent, allowing me to continue at my own pace. I've been keeping one foot on the brake, I admitted. Telling myself it's prudence, but really, it's been fear. Fear that I might be fooled again, that I might lose myself in someone else's story rather than writing my own. And now? He asked quietly. Now, I recognize that what we have is fundamentally different. You've never asked me to diminish myself, to enhance your light. You've never treated my success as threatening to your own. You've been supportive without being controlling, interested without being possessive. I squeezed his hand, finding courage in the steadiness of his gaze. So I'm ready to take the next step, to see where this might lead. Not because I need someone to complete me, but because I want to share my complete self with you. For a moment, Daniel was silent, the intensity of his expression making my heart race. Then, with characteristic thoughtfulness, he asked, "Are you sure?" "There's no rush, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." "I'm sure," I replied, the certainty of it washing through me like a wave. I've spent a year rebuilding my life exactly as I want it, and this, is part of what I want. His smile then was radiant, a perfect reflection of what I felt blossoming in my own chest. Not the desperate passion that had characterized my early days with James, but something deeper, more grounded, a connection based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine admiration. "In that case," he said, bringing my hand to his lips, "I should probably tell you that I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." From his pocket he produced a small box, not velvet like a ring box would be, but sleek brushed metal that caught the light as he placed it in my palm. "It's not what you might think," he clarified quickly. "Open it." Inside was a key, a real one this time, not the symbolic pendant he had given me after the Marshall Gala. Attached was a small tag with an address I recognized, his weekend home on the lake, a modernist retreat where he went to decompress from the demands of his restaurant empire. "It's not a proposal," he explained, his eyes never leaving mine. "It's an invitation to share the space that matters most to me, whenever you want, however you want. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. This was what had been missing with James, the sense that my autonomy mattered, that my choices were respected, that a relationship could enhance rather than restrict my freedom. "I love it," I said simply, closing my fingers around the key. "And I'm looking forward to using it, soon." The moment was interrupted by Jessica's discreet approach, tablet in hand as always. "Sorry, but the foundation director is asking for a few words from you before the dancing really gets underway. Just a brief thank you and acknowledgement of the evening's success." "Of course," I replied, slipping the key into my clutch. "To Daniel," I added, "we'll continue this conversation later?" "Count on it," he assured me, his smile promising much more than words could convey. As I made my way to the small stage where Diane was waiting to introduce me, I felt an overwhelming sense of rightness, not just about Daniel and our evolving relationship, but about the entirety of my life's new direction. The painful catalyst that had set everything in motion, James's public betrayal, had faded into proper perspective, a necessary ending that had cleared the path for a far more authentic beginning. Standing before the gathered crowd, I took a moment to absorb the scene. These were my peers now, not as someone's wife or someone's employee, but as a businesswoman and creative force in my own right. The realization settled over me like a mantle, comfortable and empowering. Thank you all for being part of this extraordinary evening, I began, my voice strong and clear. When the Westridge Foundation approached me about creating this event, they spoke of building bridges between established success and emerging potential, between different industries and perspectives, between where we've been and where we're... Boing! I paused, scanning the attentive faces before me. That concept resonated deeply with me, because I believe the most powerful transformations happen when we connect our past experiences, even the painful ones, with our future possibilities. When we recognize that endings, however difficult, create space for new beginnings. My gaze found Daniel in the crowd, his supportive presence anchoring me as I continued. A year ago, I experienced what felt like an ending. Today, I can see it for what it truly was. The first step on a journey that has led to this moment, to this room full of remarkable women supporting one another, to a life more aligned with my authentic self than I ever imagined possible. I raised my glass, inviting the assembly to join me. So tonight, I toast not just to the Westridge Women's Initiative, but to all of you who have faced endings and chosen to transform them into beginnings. To those who have discovered that sometimes, losing what you thought you wanted leads you directly to what you truly need. The room erupted in applause, glasses raised in response to my toast. As I stepped down from the stage, I was immediately surrounded by women eager to share their own stories of reinvention, of overcoming obstacles, of finding strength they hadn't known they possessed. In each conversation, I recognized echoes of my own experience. The universal journey from devastation to rebuilding, from loss to rediscovery. Later, as the evening wound to its natural conclusion and the last guests departed, I found myself once again standing in the center of the empty ballroom, just as I had after the Marshall Gala. But this time, the sense of accomplishment was deeper, more complex, layered with personal growth as well as professional success. Daniel joined me, loosening his tie as he surveyed the space. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked, his voice warm with affection. "Reflecting," I corrected gently, "on how different everything is from the last time I stood in this hotel." He nodded, understanding immediately the reference to my anniversary party. "Full circle," he observed. "More like a spiral," I mused. "Same location, but on an entirely different level." We walked together toward the exit, my heels echoing on the marble floor. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded ballroom. Daniel's car waited at the curb, the driver standing patiently beside it. "Can I take you home?" he asked. I considered the question, simple on the surface, yet laden with meaning given our earlier conversation. Home. The concept had evolved significantly over the past year, from the house I had shared with James to the temporary refuge of Sophie's guest room to my own elegant apartment overlooking the river. Each space had represented a different phase of my journey. Yes, I decided, feeling the weight of the key in my clutch. But first, I think I'd like to see the lake house this weekend, if the invitation still stands. His smile was answer. Enough, but he added for good measure. The invitation always stands. That's the point of the key. As we slid into the back seat of his car and it pulled smoothly away from the curb, I leaned my head against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Through the window, I watched the Bellamy Hotel recede from view, no longer a site of humiliation, but a place transformed by new memories, new achievements, new beginnings. A year ago, my husband had stood up at our anniversary party and announced his new girlfriend, delivering what he thought was an ending. In response, I had made an announcement of my own, not just of a new business venture, but of my own worth, my own potential, my refusal to be defined by someone else's betrayal. Tonight, surrounded by success entirely of my own making, I understood the profound truth that had eluded me during 10 years of marriage. The most important relationship in my life would always be the one with myself. Everything else, career, friendships, romance, flowed from that essential foundation. As the city lights blurred past the window and Daniel's hand found mine in the darkness of the car, I felt not the desperate gratitude of a woman saved from abandonment, but the quiet confidence of a woman who had saved herself, who had discovered, in the aftermath of public humiliation, the private strength that had been there all along. Sometimes, the most devastating announcements lead to the most liberating responses. Sometimes, what feels like the end is merely the beginning of everything you were meant to become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.